We're good?
You're good.
I would like to call the September 17th, 2025 special meeting of the South Burlington School Board to order. The first item on our agenda was a projected executive session. However, we did not have for the executive session, so we did not go into executive session today. So our next order is announcements and amendments to the agenda. Does anyone have any announcements or amendments to the agenda? Did you want to mention about
Yeah.
board training?
Yes, I would.
And we're joined today by our new interim superintendent, Joe Clark.
Yeah, so I know we've talked about it in passing, and first of all, thank you for your warm welcome here to South Burlington. It's been fantastic. I'm really pleased to be meeting people and that sort of thing. And I know that what I found so far is that we have a really good school board, and a lot of you are relatively new to the school board, and I'm new, and a lot of our administrative teams. So I think it would be really good for us to start having a discussion about getting some training from the Vermont School Boards Association. I know they have some robust training, not just about, not just what the role of the school board is, but what's our relationship going to be like, how we're going to communicate, and those sorts of things. So I would like the board to consider relatively soon getting some time set aside so we can have VSBA come in and help us learn from each other.
Are there any other announcements or amendments to the agenda? All right, our next item on the agenda is comments from the public. So there are two opportunities for the public to comment. During comments from the public, that's this section, and that can be about any topic, anything in the world that you want to talk about, you can talk about during comments from the public. The other opportunity is before the board takes action on an action item on the topic being actioned. We're not actioning anything tonight. The board will not respond to public comments unless the meeting is specially designated as a community forum and the comment is on a topic warned on the agenda. So tonight is a specially designated community forum. It's our first one. And so that means that tonight during our community forum section, the expectation is that it will be an open dialogue. In general, for public comment, for every instance of your commenting, you'll be given up to 3 minutes time. Please don't violate anyone's privacy during that time, and you cannot file an official complaint or grievance during public comment. So I would like to open up the floor for public comments. This is gonna be about any topic, but the board is not gonna respond.
Good evening, Board. Daisy Brayton, Human Resources Director. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce you to our new communications coordinator. I will actually go ahead and let Ken Elmer introduce himself, and then I kind of surprised him with this, so you got 3 minutes.
Well, hello, everybody. I tried to introduce myself to each of you independently. I think I'm Miss Lawrence and Miss Hoffman. Certainly, I would welcome any chance to talk to you personally. Again, my name is Ken Elmer, and I am a former professional. I've spent years sort of coordinating systems for businesses to communicate and to market mostly. This is my first school experience, but I'm extremely excited to be here. Extremely excited to be working with Joe. And I think, we're both new at this particular facility, or I'm new to the school system. Certainly Joe is not. But I'm just really really excited about the opportunities that are showing up already. got a chance to meet some of the principals today, and that was really amazing. And yeah, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I've been in Vermont for about 10 years, spent 10 years in California as an illustrator. I started out as a medical illustrator of all the crazy things to do, and sort of worked that into my present career. And again, very, very happy to be here.
Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
But
There any more comments from the public? All right. Well, I think what we should do now is just wait for 3 minutes. Because our community forum is supposed to start at 6:10, and anybody who might be joining remotely, I just want them to have time to show up, so. We'll just wait for 3 minutes. Sorry.
There was there's several people, but no hand raised.
All right, so we're just gonna take a brief 3-minute recess while we wait for the time to come.
You're on.
All right. Is everybody ready? Yeah, all right. So the next item on the agenda is our community forum, and somebody say something on that side of the room so the outcam sees you. Hi. Keep talking, say test.
Test.
This
Every time, somebody else said to me, keep
There we go.
talking.
There.
Certainly you were.
So, at tonight's community forum, the board will engage in a discussion about things that are on the agenda. There are 3 things on the agenda: meet the superintendent, how should we set the budget number, what committees does the community want to be a part of? There are only two rules. First of all, it has to be about a topic on the agenda. I'm not gonna stop any community member from talking about something that's not on the agenda, although they don't. But I would ask that the board only responds on those three topics. And then the other rule is that we're gonna let everybody say something before anybody says two things, right? So, I think, we'll do that. So the first topic on our community forum is meet the superintendent, so. Hi, Joe.
Hello. Good to meet you. I've met all of you, a lot of you already, maybe all of you now. I haven't shaken hands. I've been telling, I can't remember how many times I've said this and then how many times you've heard it, so I'll just repeat it. Hopefully, I won't bore you. I've been in education 33 years, all of that in Ohio. I have been a high school English teacher, a high school assistant principal, a middle school principal, a HR director, assistant superintendent, a superintendent. In several districts. The majority of my career was in a place called Mordonia Hills, which is midway between Cleveland and Akron. 14 years as a superintendent, 12 of those in Nordonia, and I spent a year in a place called Westerville and a year in a place called Waterloo. And these districts range from 750 students in one building to 15,000 students in 25 buildings. But the majority of my career was in Nordonia, which is really similar here to South Burlington, about 3,500 students and 6 schools. Excuse me. So in the middle of last year, the state of Ohio changed the requirements for retirement. They reduced the service years to 33, and I was in year 33. And so I took advantage of the opportunity to retire, but I'm still young. I feel young anyway, and I want to keep working. So my wife and I have been to New England and love it, and thought this might be it's one of those chances to really take a risk and let's try something new. And I saw this posting, applied for it, and was fortunate that this board's given me this opportunity. It's been nothing but fantastic so far. I've been very, very pleased with the things that are going on in our schools and just how kind and welcoming everybody's been to me. Personally, I'm the youngest of 11 children. My dad has an identical twin brother who also has 11 children, and we lived next door to each other growing up. 22 of us there on, we call it the compound, and it really gave me a lot of great experiences. I'm married myself 31 years to my wife Amy this summer. And we have 2 adult sons. Isaac is married to Christy. They live in Ohio, and they have our 2 grandchildren, 2 grandsons, Cameron, who's 2.5 years old, and Spencer, who is 2.5 months old. They're fantastic. My younger son, Matthew, is married to Christina. They got married this summer, July 5th. And they live in Baltimore. Christina's a teacher for the Baltimore County Schools, and Matthew works for the Baltimore Ravens. He's on their grounds crew, which is ironic for a couple things. First of all, we're diehard Browns fans, and also the kid never mowed my lawn. I don't know how that job came to pass, but he loves it. So if you ever watch a Ravens game, like this past weekend, the NFL Shield, my son painted that, and you can see him in the end zone pulling up the net for the field goals when that happens. And then during the week, I mean, they're taking care of the fields and the machines and all those sorts of things. So that's me. I'm super happy to be here. It is an interim role, and it's a 1-year contract, but I've told the board that when the board's committed, they're gonna do a search, and I think that's very wise of them. I'm gonna put my name there for sure. So hopefully, it'll turn out for me to be long-term, and if not, I'm sure they'll find somebody great to fill in long-term.
And again, for anybody online, I also wanted to make this clear. If you want to say something and you're online, just raise your hand and we'll immediately recognize you. So yeah, so I'll open it up for anybody who wants to ask any questions. I have questions. pressure's on you guys.
I'll start with the
Yeah, yeah.
comment. So Joe, welcome,
Thank you.
and we're thrilled to have you. And personally, I'm thrilled that you got the job.
Oh, would you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
For the people on the call, just introduce.
Yeah, my name is Mark Gable. I have a junior at the high school. And then I have a daughter who's in college now, graduated from South Burlington. So, and I happen to drive a school bus.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, which is the greatest part-time, full-time job ever.
Retired also, so I think that maybe you should consider it right.
Having come from Ohio, you know, I think
Yeah.
you'll find that this was a good move. And I give you a ton of credit because leaving your grandchildren behind and your wife behind for a year until my understanding is she's not coming until final decision is made.
Yeah.
That's a big commitment on your end, so thank you for doing that.
Well, I hope she's not watching because I really miss my dog.
Or my dog.
He is my Beagle Bulldog hybrid. I love that guy. And my wife and when I was in Westerville in Columbus, we did this and we're empty nesters. And honestly, with technology today, you know, we talk all the time and FaceTime and all that. And she's coming up this weekend, so I'm really excited that she'll get to see it. I've been sending her a ton of pictures and she's like, I might not go home after I come up. So it's great.
Great.
And miss the grandkids too, but getting lots and lots of pictures. They're just the best.
Jarvis, private citizen. I'm sure you know that Dave Hyatt, the assistant principal at the middle school, is also from Ohio.
Yeah.
And it's such a hardcore Ohio State football fan that he refuses to watch the game with anybody else. And I know that because I invited him to watch a game and I was turned down. Where do you stay on the college football? I said, Ohio State, how do you and Dave expect to work together?
Well, so I'll tell you the truth. When I was in Ohio as a superintendent for 14 years, I was a closet Ohio State hater. I wouldn't say that publicly in Ohio. For me, rooting for Ohio State, I'm sorry, Dave, it's like rooting for Walmart. It's like they're too big and too powerful and I like underdogs, so I root for underdogs. And my kids went to Syracuse and Louisville, so those are the teams I root for. And then generally whoever's playing Ohio State or whoever. You know, lower ranked is who I'm rooting for. I'm a bigger soccer, I'm a diehard Browns fan, so that's the team that I schedule my life around is the Browns. And they've let me down for many, many, many years, but I'm also a huge soccer fan. I like to watch the MLS and the Premier League and international, so I really enjoy that.
Good.
I have to get up to see it, Vermont Green and
I would love to see it. I have seen DVM play. In fact, they played Akron U last
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
which is, you know, right from where I'm from. So that was a great game. The Vermont Green it sounds outstanding. I'd love to see Montreal FC too. I'm a big Hawks Crew guy, so I'm interested to see them.
Moments on the South Burlington soccer game too, so.
Yeah, I was at the game yesterday and very good game.
I have a question, can you tell us a little bit about your educational philosophy? Just, you know.
Yeah, I tend to say it in really pretty frank terms, and generally my educational philosophy is we want kids to move out of their parents' basement, right? Our goal is to provide kids with skills so that they can be productive members of society, so they can find a job that has healthcare, maybe a retirement plan. And I don't care what the job is, as long as they love doing it and are good doing it, that's what I want to get. Now, that's kind of a crass way of saying it. In the big scheme, I'm really a big proponent of having really engaging instruction and teaching or treating kids really, really well. I think with great relationships, with great instruction, test scores tend to take care of themselves. Now we're never going to ignore data. We will look at data, analyze data and see what we can do to provide, you know, interventions where we need to. But to me, it's all about people, right? every number that we see on a chart somewhere, there's a child behind that. And I want to make sure that when children are coming to our schools, they feel welcome and safe and cared for. And so I will judge my success by how comfortable our kids feel coming to our school. And when they feel great, I think they're going to perform well too.
So I have a question in regards to community engagement. I have to applaud you. I think you've done a fantastic job reaching out since you've been here. You know, showing up at the football game, on Friday night. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to soccer games. Really appreciated the emails that you sent out and your video, your YouTube that went today. And I was wondering who within our community received that? Was that the parents and guardians or? How, so this is kind of a two-part question. That's the first part. So go ahead, you can answer that one.
So the first part is the email and the video. I mean, the YouTube video is on a channel, so anybody can find it, but it was sent to every address in our school messenger list. So it's about 9. The gentleman in the back may know even better. It was a ton, 9,700, I think, 9,700 different. Yeah, so people have multiple phone numbers, multiple, but it told me that there were 9,700 contacts that I was sending that to. Yeah.
Of staff and faculty.
Staff.
It went to staff,
yeah.
faculty, students, parents, guardians, okay.
Yeah,
So my next question is, how are we going to cast a wider net to encompass more people within the community that maybe not engaged in that?
yeah. Well, you had the great opportunity to meet Ken earlier. Ken is an expert in communications, and he and I sat down actually yesterday and started talking big picture about what do we want to do? What's our end game? We know that we have a variety of stakeholder groups and we want all of them to be informed. And we also know that, the majority of our folks that live in this community do not have children that go to our schools. So we need to come up with methods to reach all of those folks. I believe that starts with surveying people and finding out how do you want us to reach out to you? Social media, of course, I know there's a lot of discussion about use of social media in the schools anymore, but that seems to me like a lot of people are on Facebook and whatnot. So actually Ken got the Facebook login account information today. And he said, I need to post something. Like, well, why don't you tell people that I'm here? And so I think that should be his first post if it hasn't happened already. But the other thing I've talked about a lot is this idea of these 3 Q meetings that I'm going to be running, 3 questions. So the administrative team and I have already started brainstorming lists of every community group that we can think of. We'll continue that brainstorming into next week. And at that point, I will start getting out into the community for not just students and parents, but community members at large to ask, what do you like about our schools? What can we do better? And what do you expect out of the superintendent? And I expect at that point, a lot of these topics will come up about and ideas about how we might be able to reach folks who are not in our list. Yeah, so
That's great.
it's under nothing concrete yet, other than we know that that's a priority.
So will you have some metrics or KPIs that you can share with us? Like this is how many, contacts we've had and how many touch points we've had with different groups
Yes,
and where we're seeing
absolutely.
some additional.
As we go through this, I'll report out to you. I will, as I'm collecting data, I will share with the board the feedback that I'm getting, the number of groups I've spoken with, or actually listened to. I'm not really there to speak, I'm there to listen. How many people were in attendance. And then at the very end, when we're done, I'll also send out and publish out to the community. Anybody that didn't have the opportunity to come to one of these meetings, here's a written survey that you can take to give us feedback. It's very good.
I have another question. So you've only been in Vermont now for a couple weeks, and one of the questions that people had during the search process for interim was you know, how is a new person gonna deal with Vermont's particular taxing and budgeting, things? And so you probably don't know a lot yet, but, like, are you able to make any early compare and contrast with what you had back in Ohio versus like what we have here?
Yeah, I mean, not knowing all of, how Vermont works, and I'm meeting with superintendents, area, Champlain Valley superintendents on Friday. I'm going to the state superintendent conference next week, and I'll start getting more of this, knowledge. But what I know so far is, I don't think you could design a worse funding system than the state of Ohio has. It's literally designed to make communities hate school people, because of the constant, levies that we have to pass, in order to fund our schools. In Ohio, we don't do like an annual budget, we do a 5-year forecast, and the 5-year forecast is based on, it's a 5-year forecast, but the state only does a biennial budget, so you're shooting at the wind about how much we're going to need. And the state in Ohio now is talking about these cash carryovers, well, the whole, large cash carryovers that districts have. But it's because the system is such that, income does not, school revenue does not go up with, as home values do. The millage rate or the tax rate goes down every time somebody's home rate goes up. So the income is always flat. The expenses always go up. And when those lines cross, you need to ask for a levy. And so superintendents become politicians asking people to please give us money. And they will say, but you have a $10 million cash carryover. And you'll say, yeah, but we're spending more than we're taking in. And they'll say, well, that you shouldn't do that. But you have to, by nature, you have to. So not fully knowing what Vermont is, I can confidently say I will take it over Ohio's. But I know it's changing and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, I did a little research on Ohio, and there's a lot of money funneling into private school and private religious schools in Ohio.
Yeah.
Huge voucher system, it sounds, that's really kind of crippling the public schools in Ohio, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like it's
Ohio
getting
is,
worse.
Ohio is known to be, if not the most generous to private schools.
Yeah.
One of the top most generous
That-
to private schools.
That's my understanding.
There are, you can be a private school parent whose child has never attended a public school. With no financial hardship at all, and still get a voucher from the state to pay your tuition to a private school.
Right, and my understanding is that there are so many families that are doing this, that even like basic services in public schools.
No, right.
Can't meet.
And the thing about the private schools is that they don't have to follow any of the rules that the public schools do. So
Right.
they can still decide who they're going to enroll. So they're getting all the money, but they don't have to provide services for students with special needs or transportation or any of those kinds of things. If a student misbehaves, they can ask them to leave. Public schools, what I'm proud about public schools is we educate every child. And it's really just an unfair playing field in Ohio. And I'm really excited to learn more about this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've since I've been here, I've heard the word budget probably 10,000 times. And I know it's big. I know I have, that frankly will be my biggest learning curve, but I'm ready to jump into it. And yeah, with the experts that are here in the room to help me here this first year, frankly, I will learn quick. I'm a quick study. Yeah, hopefully, it's go well when it comes to meeting day.
What other, so the topic on the agenda is, meet the superintendent, get a sense of his opinions on things. So does anybody have other questions about just where Joe is coming from? And what he had, what.
I got one more.
Yeah.
So I tell you, it's absolutely wonderful. You're coming in with incredibly positive attitude. You've gone through the schools, and you've met the administration, you've met a bunch of the students, and you've met a bunch of the teachers. And I've heard nothing but praise for South Burlington schools, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
However, we know that it's not a perfect system that we have here. Is there anything that you would bring up after your touring of the schools that would jump out at you that needs to be addressed?
You know, at this,
Immediately, not soon.
I would say at this point, I mean, the most glaring things to me are not anything to do with people. It's more to do with systems that we have in place. What I'm hearing, and again, it's not been a ton, so I don't want to sound any alarms here. But I'm hearing things like, it's hard to get students to school on time at the middle school because the buses are running late. And through no fault of the bus drivers, but there's a system in place that is causing that to back up a little bit. I'm hearing that there are, teachers have some frustration about just the ability to make copies, you know, and how many copies they have access to and fewer copy machines, which I know was probably a reduction because it costs money. We, middle school, we don't bus kids to athletic events. That's and really a big inconvenience for parents, you know, so, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I'm hearing, right off the.
Okay, thank you.
I add another one to that list,
Sure.
and it's very different than that. And that was math in the district. It's been a question that I was on the board 3 years ago, the 6 years before I went off the board 3 years ago. And it was a question then, we did a math audit. The outcome of that audit, it's a little unclear to me, like how that actually impacted what we were doing in the district. And I think I still hear from parents all the time across the whole spectrum, kids who are struggling with math, kids who want more math, and kids who just want to be on grade level at math and are getting worksheets and work that is from grades way below where they are. And it's a problem. It's a real problem. And we're seeing it in the test scores too. So I like the notion that, you know, good relationships and all of that lead to better performance. Something's not working when it comes to math. And I know the same is true for literacy because our literacy scores have gone down over time. And so I think there are some real issues that need to be really looked into. And I think that those are going to be multi-year issues. And I think that really we need to start now looking at those issues because it might take us a few years to solve them. And so I wouldn't like to see you like push that off until, you know,
Right.
Until next year. I would really like to, especially on the math and the literacy side, really see us dig in more deeply.
No, but I would just caution that there's a huge gap also between our students in poverty and students not in poverty. And so those scores will necessarily go up when we start doing a better job, working with our students who are disadvantaged.
I hear you, and I agree with that. I also know that there's a lot of frustration in the transition from families from the middle school to the high school. And where kids get placed in math, and the process is very unclear. It makes people feel that they don't trust the district because they're not sure how to get their kids tested, if there's testing, because there are different messages about whether there's any testing, how to get them into different levels of math. And then there's also this weird bifurcated system where people can take online courses over the summer to get into higher levels of math at the high school, but that's very expensive and it falls all on parents to do that. So you end up perpetuating what you're talking about, which is kids from disadvantaged backgrounds don't have those same opportunities, which they really should, you know? And so there's some real issues I think that we need to just be really open and transparent about and just really focus on.
Thank you for that.
May I'm sorry,
No, I just say that is the most important point that you pointed out.
I was gonna add to that some students, my daughter's a great student. And she had no idea about the summer math program. It was never brought to her attention. And so she didn't do it. And so now she's stuck in a math class, it's below.
And my sixth grader, I have a seventh grader now, who was a sixth grader last year, and toward the end of the sixth grade term, they were handed worksheets that literally said in the corner, they were from some curriculum online that were second grade worksheets. This is the whole class. This isn't kids who are like struggling and are being pulled out for extra help in some way. Like the whole class was doing second grade stuff at the end of the school year. And that's that's distressing. Like, that's not a great look. Something's broken if you're having to catch up on place value, which is what they were studying at the end of sixth grade, just so that everybody's ready to move into the next thing. We shouldn't be there. We should be, mastering other things by then.
Well, I think, thank you for the feedback, and I think as we go out and do these 3Q meetings and ask these questions, this will be all the input that we get. That will help us as we, decide where we're gonna, put our focus, but glad that you, and I will tell everybody when I go to these meetings that I'm not gonna solve any problems tonight, but I'm gonna listen so we can, prioritize where we need to go.
Did you have any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a really important point that you just brought up, because this is sort of, I've had, my personal experience was that I had a third and fourth grader, and my fourth grader started out in another district, and they started out with a whole different set of how they taught the kids how to do literacy and phonics words, and just getting them to kind of memorize to compensate for their learning the phonics parts. So it kind of gave them like a boost for fluid reading. And my younger daughter that started in this district, she does not have a base for this. So I addressed that as a concern many times, every single meeting, and all I was, getting responded back was that they were doing okay in the test scores, and this test scores was, they're right. One of it was, she's right in the middle of the class that she needs to be. She's exactly in the middle. And then just by compared to other schools that exactly the kids her same age, they were completely in a different reading level. So it feels like a different, like standard to understand, like kids should be reading at third grade, and sometimes, and then there's like all kinds of excuses. Oh, we're doing another literacy program and they're gonna catch up, and we're introducing something else that's gonna help them to learn better. And then in parallel, I decided to take my daughter also that she was experiencing disruption, a lot of disruption, so the teachers weren't able to proceed, and she was getting kind of like dragged into the like all the bad behavior that was happening. So I pulled her out last year to homeschool her, just to kind of not to waste her time, because it was too much for her to go to school and then come home and have to kind of catch up. It's too much for a kid. So instead of wasting her time, I decided to pull her out and homeschool her. So what I did was I took all of this, I started with little pie charts, like 1/3, learning, and progressed. And to her level, she was like able to do a lot of, numerical, just fractions, extended fractions, and she was able to do all that. And then so she's back at school now, and she's doing like, just basic numerical placement, and just a total regression from having to go back to school. And her capability, she was kind of bored, and her capabilities are as such that she can, is not being pushed to her level, essentially. So, but I just want to say that the teachers have been amazing, and that they are like very great with the kids, and
Good, awesome. I
the
really appreciate this
teachers
feedback.
have been really good. She has a really great teacher this year that is just on point, and I guess she's trying to kind of fix all the problems that have amounted to now she's like, we don't know if she has dyslexia, I don't know, like, because she'd like learn how to write letters and numbers. It was just drawing. She never like actually learned the correction that you start the letters from the top and stuff. And so she like in the progression of her learning, now she's like having to regress and kind of go back to the basics. So I feel like it's really important to not just focus on test scores, and just actually teach kids like I went to school in Brazil, and for my early education, and the education there is completely, they really teach kids how to read and how to do math. and all this other stuff. I don't know what's going on, but, you know, it doesn't cost very much to do that kind of stuff. But
Thank you so much for that feedback. I hope to gather more of that coming up. It sounds to me like clearly we have some concerns about the academic program.
yeah, that's,
Thank you.
So, we're at the 30-minute mark. We've got 3 topics and, an hour and a half. Does anybody have a final question on the topic of kind of like, what does Joe think about X? I'm also looking online to see if there's anybody who might have joined and wanted to.
No hand up.
Okay. Oh.
Can I ask one more question? Dr. Cook, how was special education funded in Ohio and how is that handled? Because this is an issue that we're having in Vermont and the extraordinary special education, so education for kids who can't be educated in the classroom last year doubled in
Right.
Vermont, the cost for that. And so there's something in our statewide system that maybe isn't working. And I just wondered how Ohio funds special
No,
education. Is it like a block grant or is it
They
like?
do it poorly. No, it's
Okay.
funded federally and the federal government who puts all the regulations together does not fund special ed to the level that they should fund special ed. They do, and we love all of our kids and we want, and I believe that all kids need to be in school. It's great for the kids with disabilities and also great for the kids without disabilities to be in school with those folks, but there are some really high costs with that. And now it's in Ohio, it is not, the state doesn't, there is a catastrophic cost, so a student with, say, a multiple handicap might get more funding to the district, but it's always a fraction of what the actual cost is. Yeah, so it's, I doubt that I'm sure it's no better than Vermont, but Vermont might not be better either.
And we'll take it in one time.
Great. All right, so, our next, topic in the community forum is how should we set the budget number? This is a tough question because like Joe was mentioning, you know, we're a new board except for Laura. And I also warned Laura that we'd be looking to her to remember things. So we also have Jean Marie here. We also have Tim here. And so basically the process that was suggested to the board this year is that, and this is a suggestion made by a consulting group called Tassant Partners, is that essentially the board should tell the central office a number to shoot for. And then the central office comes up with a budget and then it goes to the principals who have an allocation. And so that first action is that the board has to tell a number and I think we feel that we need to get prepared as soon as possible for what number we should be setting. So I asked Joe to pull up the slide, and just give a quick, talk about that. So I'm gonna turn it over to you to kind of get the discussion started.
Okay, so what do I have it in my Google Drive. Do I need to? Can I share right from yours? So, share my screen. With my Zoom. I do. So. Perfect. With that, I just need to make it so people can see it. Yeah. This is what Oh, it's better. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, yeah, this is the timeline that, Tassant is the group that I believe is helping us with this, and they provided this, and it shows us at school level engagement, district engagement, and board engagement, over the next several months. And in October, it starts with, principals, giving some feedback about their vision and budget priorities, and the historical context of where, where they've been in the past with their budgets, and key upcoming dates. They'll share those at their open houses. District-wide, there will be an overview of our priorities with the community survey. So I know that the board is just beginning to talk today about what some of these priorities should be, but it looks as if we've, told folks we're going to survey them to get some input on what our goals should be. And then there's, to be a community forum, so we can get some more input, prior to setting the overall budget for the coming year. In November, we'll have, principals, discussions with principals about what the student budgets, should be. In other words, how much are we gonna spend on each student? There'd be a virtual town hall, to get further, input district-wide. So again, October and November is a lot of just data collection, opinion collecting from a lot of stakeholders. In December, we'll email back to the community, the school community, sharing what the final decisions have been made. Again, another video overview of the budget that will be submitted to the board. Via all of our communication channel. Again, we met Ken earlier and he'll be working on that. And then the board, after they've decided this is what we're gonna ask for, then they'll start making a case for the budget. You know, why they settled on what they settled on, what the tax rate's gonna be, how it's gonna impact people in their pocketbook. The student board, in January, the student board director presentation to their fellow high school students, so we'll have fun doing that. Talking to your classmates about what the budget's gonna look like. And then the final budget presentation at the January board meeting. So again, in the next 2 months, it's gonna be a lot of listening, a lot of getting feedback. And in December, it's gonna be really crunching numbers and deciding this is what we're gonna ask for. And then in January, we will talk about what that final number is and start telling people, telling the story. This is what we're asking for, and this is what that is needed for.
And there's another slide too, that somebody may remember that says, it's like a purple slide and it says like, first it's the board, then it's the central office, then it's the principals. Do you know the slide I'm talking about?
I'll find it.
The start of the process is here with the school board. Giving us guidance.
And what month are we supposed to say, this is the number that you should be shooting for? I'm asking this as a general. Jean Maria, you may also know the number. Like, what month are we supposed to?
Sooner rather better than later, but additionally, you have to wait for some information to come in from from the AOE, and we need to know about what the health insurance number is gonna look like, so. We will have to set a target and likely readjust once those numbers come in. I have been talking with my team a lot. Joe's looking for the slide. Let me just rant for a second. I have been talking a lot with my team about the redistricting and how that's gonna impact us in our budget. And that is a few years down the road, but it's coming at us. And right now, we are one of the higher spending per pupil districts in the state when you look at our ranking. And so I think I would, in like my own personal budget, I don't want at home for my income 1 month to be, say, $10,000, and then all of a sudden it's only $5,000 and I gotta figure out how to pay all my bills and have as much money coming in. So my goal for the district over the next few years as we move to redistricting and whatever the state tells us we get to spend, is that we can keep our spending low, keep our numbers down, so that when that number comes in, I fear that it will be lower than what we're accustomed to, so that whatever those changes are we have to make when that is forced upon us, it is an easier pill to swallow. So in those conversations with my team, we've been talking around, I think it's the job of the central office team and my staff base to look at the way that we do business and the way that we operate, so that we can find efficiencies there and do business as efficiently and as inexpensively as we possibly can. And then, that is our way to partner with educators and the building principals as we look at, ways that we maybe have to adjust our staffing.
Okay, thank you for that. And it looks like, yes, this is the, like, very concrete, timeline that I was. So total budget amount, school board, oh wow, September, October.
You gotta set a number soon, but it'll likely be adjusted.
There is, I still need more information.
Yeah.
And, you know, it would be really helpful to speak with principals and building administrators to find out exactly what their priorities are. Yeah, we didn't do that, so. And then to hear like what's available. I can make up a number right now, but I don't know, you know, $500 million. No, I don't know. You know, I know
So I-
that's done, but you get my point, like. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I can
yeah,
make it up,
yeah,
but
yeah.
really, we need like, what's available?
Yeah.
What is gonna happen with the AOE? And then I know there's all these like mystical numbers out there.
Yeah.
Somebody in the
That's what
back
makes it
room.
difficult if trying to
Right,
like.
the
pick,
guy in
yeah.
the back room, the VSBA, like crunching numbers. That's the guy.
Yeah.
And
So
this is a target budget.
Yeah, target.
But this has to be done before principals are moving forward with the October.
Right, you'll have a chance to do priority setting also when your allocation. So I kind of want to flip the conversation on its head though for a minute. Because as like a taxpayer. I don't know the details of what you guys are talking about, right? And so. I can imagine thinking about the budget in terms of like, well. Level funded, like, let's just say, let's use the exact same number as last year. And what that means is that there would have to be cuts to the staff because the healthcare costs are mandated. And then I can also say as a taxpayer, well, level funded is excessive, it's excessively stringent, so maybe what we should do is inflation. We should just say, take the inflation number and multiply that by the budget. And then that gives a number that as a taxpayer makes sense to me. Or maybe we said, you know, one of the first conversations I had when I got on the board was with a former board member who told me that the way they used to do it was by the grand list. You know, the school budget went up by no more than what the grand list expanded. And so that's the kind of like what the discussion that I'd like to have with as many people as possible is like, you know, does it make sense to people to set the number at inflation, knowing that given healthcare costs, that probably will mean teacher cuts? Is the community dead set on a level funded budget, which would be very stringent? On the other hand, does the community want to say, you know, we want to make investments while we still can, you know, and, you know, let's do above inflation. So if we can just flip the conversation like that, and hear from people about, you know, what would it be like to go back to inflation based or grand list based? I'm truly a clean slate on this and I would like to.
Just for some context.
Please do, yeah.
One of the reasons why the Toussaint recommendation was to have the school board determine this target budget, and everyone knew that it was target. Is because one of the other steps of the Toussaint process is to allocate to the schools based upon the number of students and using certain demographic information, right? So if the high school has 850 students and the middle school has 500 students and Orchard and Chandler, et cetera. The idea was for the pot of money out of the total budget that will be allocated to the schools as opposed to like facilities, you know, dealing with that separately. They need to have the denominator in order to do that calculation and to say, okay, high school, your share of this pot that the school board has designated is X number of dollars. How are you gonna spend it? And then the principals take that initial number and they say, you know, and it's very different in the elementary schools and the middle school and especially the high school. The high school is the craziest one because there's so much extra programming and options and alternatives and things like that, where, you know, what Holly faces and her colleagues in the elementary school is much more rigid, that you need based on class sizes, you need X number of teachers and you need X number or Y and Z, et cetera. So that's the reason why they're looking for this initial target number. But it's completely divorced from what's gonna happen in the ensuing months, once you start getting all this information from the state. And it's going to then become a question of what will the voters find affordable and acceptable based upon what's gonna happen to their tax rates. But there's no question that, I like this process because it's more in line with what we expect will happen in the future state when we're laying the foundation formula where schools across the state are gonna be given an X number of dollars per student based on demographics. And the challenge is always gonna be setting expectations that then are destroyed by the data, or by these factors that come in. And it can have a significant impact, you know, I actually ran some numbers that maybe this isn't the right time to do it, but I was doing some in my spare time, which I have a lot of now. Projecting what the impact could be of a flat budget, of a modest 5% budget. And the biggest driver of this is going to be, what is the real estate inflation rate in South Burlington for this coming year? Because that's average close to 10% for the last 3 years. And if it's around 10%, again, and it may or may not be, I mean, unless you think that real estate value in South
So real
Burlington.
estate inflation helps tax revenues.
What's that?
Real estate inflation helps tax revenues, so that's why it
No.
depends on it.
Well, the macro thing you need to understand is that the way that tax rates are determined has really nothing to do with, or has relatively little to do with South Burlington as it does the entire state, because the state will set the yield, which is one of the most important parts of the calculation. But if you have high real estate inflation, what it's basically saying is that your house that was worth $400,000 this year or last year is now worth $450,000. And that's the study they do. That's a common level appraisal study they do every year. We have no control over that. And then that is just applied to the calculation after other factors are taken into account. And you're basically paying a higher tax rate on the same assessed value on the grant list. And so, until we do another reappraisal for the city, which God knows when, some cities, towns have waited 20, 30 years for this. And ours was about maybe 8 years ago.
No, it wasn't that long.
So it's like 5 years ago. It was during COVID
Yeah, it was
because
during
we all
COVID.
had to
4 to
choose
5
whether we
years
let
ago.
people in.
Yeah.
But ours has been one of the biggest changing ones in the state. So we started at 113% for our TLA right after the reappraisal. And then we were last year, like 70?
74.
Yeah. And so they divide the number you get at the bottom. There's like this whole calculation, you divide the number by the common level of appraisal. So a higher common level of appraisal means a lower tax rate. And that common level of appraisal is basically saying, here's how properties are valued right now, based on the last reappraisal, but here's what the market value is. That's the study that PBR does at the state level. And they provide that number to the districts, out of the district's control, really. And unfortunately, that usually comes with the December 1 letter, which
That actually historically hasn't come until the week between Christmas and New Year's, which is why things go crazy.
So I wanna kind of play the devil's advocate here for a minute and just say like, a lot of that as a taxpayer sounds like inside baseball. And I'm like, at the end of the day, like, why can't I as a taxpayer just tell you the budget is allowed to grow with inflation and you guys figure it out within that box? It's up to you all, you know what I mean? So like, what am I missing when I think about a taxpayer's point of view? And Beth, I know you want to say
I
something.
do, because historically, and you told me not to, but I'm gonna anyway. Historically, our conversations in South Burlington have always been about the number and not about programming and not about kids. And that's why we're here. We're not a business. We're a public school. Our inputs are not the same. When you have a business, your inputs are the same. Our inputs are not the same. Our outputs are not the same. We are trying to create citizens that we want to vote and do all these things.
And if we only talk about that number and the tax rate, we're forgetting the kids. And they're left out of the conversation. And so I just wanna make sure that when we talk about the budget, we're also talking about programming and what that budget means to our students.
Yeah, I agree completely with Beth on that point. And I, just so everyone remembers, I have 2 kids in high school in South, right? So, I am not, I'm talking as a parent as much as a taxpayer. But, and everything that Beth said is correct, you know, and I think that this new way of approaching the budget cycle is beneficial to all of us by front running it with the priorities of the schools and the students as and maybe those will need to be cut further down the road. But it will at least help us from a community engagement point of view, get all that stuff on the table up front. Like, this is a list of our priorities at the high school. This is a list of our priorities, middle school, etc. I would suspect that the city will not be able to afford everything that's put on that list, but you have to start with that list and work backwards. Where I think we may have done disservice to ourselves is that we were so obsessed with the tax rate because the whole state is obsessed with the tax rate, right? The governor is obsessed with the tax rate. Every newspaper is obsessed with the tax rate. And 80% of our residents don't even have kids in the school, right? And only 20% of at most of the residents who are eligible to vote actually vote. And so
So let's bring it back to that. I mean, I think that as a taxpayer, again, I could say that the list of needs this year, let's say that it suggests that we grow at double inflation. And then next year, like, I as a taxpayer don't have a guarantee that it's not just gonna be every year significantly more than inflation, which is then just by definition unsustainable.
Agreed.
And so, like, what's the, like, how should the board be saying, and I would like to propose on the board that, like, we say, we don't necessarily specify a number, we specify a design, and the design is like, well, you guys are gonna be level funded, or you guys are gonna be inflation, or you're gonna be double inflation in year 5. And so, like, what, if the schools come back and tell us that they need more money than inflation. And I'm taking out, we have to take out the part that's mandated by the state, like healthcare is mandated by the state. Gold plan for the whole family paid for 80% by the schools, that's mandated by the Vermont Health Commissioners, like that's entitlement. But like, for the money that the teachers in the schools say that they need, how can I as a taxpayer know that next year it's not gonna also be again double inflation and double inflation, like what? And, you know, what, how should I think about that? How should we think about that?
I mean, when you say double inflation, for the taxpayer, double inflation is gonna be like high double digits for tax inputs, right? So is the inflation?
I'm
How
talking
much,
about
how
inflation.
much money are you adding to the $71.5 million school budget, or is inflation like? My taxes were X this year.
No, I think if you take a step back and you say like, the inflation number right now is like 2 or 3%. Like, that's what the CPI is, that's what the CPIU is. So like, when people think about inflation, I think they're thinking about like a 2% number, a 5%. Over COVID, it was more like 5 or 7%. So like, if what we're growing the district's budget by is more than 2% or 3% or 5%, how are we supposed to explain that? And how are we supposed to say that it's not gonna be like that every single year? I think that's like my sense is that constituents who are not in the schools, who don't have school connections, that's what they're allergic to. Is like, why is it that you guys get to double it? You get to double inflation every year. Like, how should we think about that?
I think though, and this is a hard question, right, because it's complicated, or everything about this is complicated, but. I don't know if the average citizen and or voter. Cares as much about the inflation increase of the $71.5 million school budget. or the impact that that has on the property taxes, because it's from their own pocket, right? And that's why it's hard to separate them and why you need to build an incredibly compelling story for them about why you need more than inflation, let's say. I think people can, although other school districts this past year, when it was so difficult, they cut their budgets, right? They had like negative budgets, and not even level funding, so. The other thing is, in the lead up to whatever ends up happening with the new act, like, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows the redistricting, nobody knows the foundation formula, so. If it's an opportunity for South Burlington, and if they're willing to pay our taxes to fund it, maybe you try to get yourself in a better situation this year.
So ask for a lot, relatively speaking.
Balanced with, once you get all these state factors and you realize that what you're asking for is gonna be a 25% tax increase, right? I mean, that's probably gonna be turned down, and then you're gonna have 2 weeks to get a new budget, and then you're gonna get 2 weeks to get another budget, and then refer to last year's budget.
So does anybody else have?
I think you have a raised hand on.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please go ahead, Jess.
Can you hear me on the call? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Okay, because I can't hear you immediately. I'm a librarian at Orchard School. I'm speaking up because this slide itself that's on the screen is another example of a sort of problematic, like underreporting what's happening with the school libraries in the elementary schools. The librarian needs to have 2 stars next to it. We are beyond max capacity in my school library, and the EQS require that school librarians, at least one librarian for a school of 300. Our school ranges from like 415 to 430, and sufficient support staff in order to run a well-rounded and like a fully supported school library program. In the elementary schools, just like the middle and high schools, there is an expectation to have the doors open for students to come and go through the day. But I teach 23 classes a week that are 50 minutes each. I can't actually help staff when they come in and need help. I can't co-teach or co-plan with teachers. There's a lot of things that are in my mandate as outlined in my job requirement and the educational quality standards, which also say a supported schedule that allows librarians to do their jobs. This district has lost 6 librarians since 2023. There's a problem. I understand that we have financial burdens, but underreporting some of the issues, the fact that 2 of our schools are well over 300 students. And in my case, my staff got cut this year. I have a less than 0.5 assistant now. Every other building has a 1.0 library assistant. Orchard is by far the largest elementary school. We are not operating at like anything outlined in the EQS. And I would certainly love to welcome a further conversation, but this is again a time that I've seen in one of our district-wide slides, like a misrepresentation of what our staff is. When they made the cut, they just said it was a 1.0 to a 0.5. They didn't say what the library's assistant does. They are not just working in the library. They are the all building IT support staff. And ours is the only one that doesn't have somebody after 11 in the morning every day. So thanks, that's all. I just needed to speak out because it's been a frustrating year to try and continue to do my job when I went into library science for a reason. Thanks.
And just to clarify, this slide is a Toussaint slide, and it's based on the ed quality standards. So this is not, this doesn't represent what we have currently in South Burlington. This was the final budget, the way that Toussaint had come up with that allocation.
And this is, I think, what I meant when I said I would like to hear from administrators and teachers, like that kind of story.
Yeah.
I can tell you at Essex Westford, where I am, we cut an entire French teacher, and Spanish and French and Japanese have been reduced. Our classes are huge. And we, And then the need is really great. So, I mean, these numbers that are bounced around, you're not talking about the human beings, like it's like devoid of the human, like there's no sense of the human beings that are sitting in my room. And it is not a business. It's not. It's like, yeah, business, you get to pick and choose. I don't get to pick and choose who walks in my room. I have, 25 kids, but across the hall from me is the algebra teacher, 35 kids in her class. She doesn't get to decide who's in there. Right, so, I mean, this is like, for me, it's very hard to talk about this budget without knowing exactly what is happening in the schools. I mean, so, but I'm feeling the pressure too, so I think that's what I meant. I would like to hear from the staff, because otherwise I can't, how can I make a decision?
Okay, hi, Elizabeth Fitzgerald, city council and grandmother too, and the elementary school. City council did provide direction to city staff at Monday's meeting on budget. And the direction was around kind of a rolling CPI, so that was set at 3.4%. Whether it stays there or not, remains to be seen, but department heads will go back and work with the city manager to come back with what meets that target and then what isn't funded at that target. And that's where the discussion will come. I do think it's important from a timing standpoint for the leadership team, the board, to sort of set a direction and then hear that information that I think everybody wants to hear of what can get funded at that level and then what is not getting funded, or what is either desirable to be done, what might have to be cut, and programs should always be evaluated for whether they're still effective. But at some point, we collectively will go to the taxpayer with our respective budgets, and it'll be a consolidated impact on the tax rate. And hopefully the whole story will be palatable to the community. But I know the healthcare rates typically are given to the Department of Financial Regulation mid-October. So that's when that component will be available. DFR could accept or reject those, but typically they don't. So whatever gets submitted to DFR will be close to approximate for at least that component. And then the December 1st, assuming that that date is available, that'll be another piece of the puzzle. But I know our goal as council was to present that initial target. And I think that is a message to the community of what we're trying to accomplish and deliver at this stage. And again, you walk that tightrope of it fundamentally changing as you get down the road. But at least if you're starting with something that is intent, I think it sends the message to the community that this is the goal we're striving for. And is also, the city is very aware of the pressure on the school system, and the city budget was adjusted last year to reflect the substantial increase in the taxpayer bill that went associated with the general ed fund. That's not going to feel good to do that again, because the programs and services provided to many folks that don't have kids in the school system are funded by the city budget. But benefit all community members. So it's a tough tightrope, but I do think intent from the leadership team is important.
So did you just say that the city council directed the city administration to set budgets for next year at the inflation rate?
Yes.
And you said rolling, so like if you're giving them the flexibility that if the inflation rate goes way up.
There was no flexibility. We looked at the historical rolling CPI and we determined it to be 3.4%.
So you guys, you fixed it, then you said, okay. That to me sounds very.
I think the current Northeast CPI is about 3.6 for the first half of this.
And there are also CPIs that, not CPIs, but there are other inflation factors like blanking on the acronym for it. If you go to the Joint Fiscal Office website, there's a whole list of different inflation factors, and one of them takes into account healthcare increases, which is, I think, where the state is headed eventually, when we're sort of building into law inflation metrics for some of these things. And I think we need to be really careful about like which inflation metric we're using. The other thing is, the city has a little bit of a different setup than the district does, because you can have big increases in the number of students, which, you know, could change the overall size of the budget. You could have a drastic change, just a handful of really tiny kids coming into the district can dramatically change the number of staff you need. So it's by nature an iterative process. You're not gonna be able to say, like, bring me back a budget that's 3.4% more than last year. That's what you have to work with, and everything else we're just gonna cut to get to that. It has to be a conversation. So, I mean, I think it's not a bad framework to say, hey, you know, CPI to start with, and as Elizabeth said, come back with what that means in terms of what's gonna have to be cut, because there will be cuts at CPI. I guarantee there will be cuts at CPI. But again, to sort of just, sorry to keep reiterating what Elizabeth's point, but one thing that was frustrating when I was on the board was we often put in place programs that had all good intentions and that were meant to be pilot programs, and then there was never any true review of them to say, for example, and this is way back when, so now behavioral interventions are part of our system like that, that we need them and we need a lot of them. But we would put something like that in place and there would be no sort of real review of the outcomes of like whether this actually helped teachers, you know, like, did it actually expand their ability to focus on other kids in the class? If there was a behavioral interventionist, like, what did it look like with 2 in one school and 1 in the other? You know, we never really sort of took stuff back if it wasn't working. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of give and take there, and that kind of stuff takes a while to do. I'm not even sure that we always get to this point in the fall and sort of say, we really should be reviewing these programs, but it's already the end of September and we really just need to get a budget done. And so it's really tricky. So that may be something that, you know, we start to implement after this budget cycle, like really reviewing each of the programs, because that sort of addresses the drivers as opposed to just the overall number, which is kind of tricky.
And could justify spending above inflation, I think is maybe part of what you're saying.
Well, and when you're talking to the public, like, it is tricky, because I do take your point, Tim, that like people do look at their tax bills when they get them and they do pull them out, and compare them to last year. However, when they go to the ballot box, what they see in the ballot box is how much we're increasing per student, per weighted average student. And they do see like what the overall percentage increase is. So we do have to be a little bit careful with that. That was a constant battle to try to explain to the community, yes, the per pupil cost is going up, but because of all these state factors, your tax rate may be going down this year. And people just, it's inherent in the way the system is structured right now, and it creates a lack of trust. And so it just needs a lot of communication for, here's what we're doing to contain costs or to make sure that we're operating in the best way for students and the most efficient way for taxpayers. And yet, even if we're doing all those right things, we still may have a tax increase because of what's happening at the state level.
So just Bridget, I'm going to follow up with you so you can point me to the inflation, including healthcare,
Yes.
because that does sound very interesting.
Just a quick comment, because I think you make a good point, Bridget, is you could set a rate or a number, whatever, however you choose to do it, and make it on a fixed enrollment and a fixed acuity or weighting of students as well, because that would allow for that adjustment.
And what you're saying is that then we would say, if there's 10 students, well, how?
Well, basically, if enrollment increases substantially in any situation, then you haven't locked yourself in, because you would potentially need additional staff, or, you know, you would need some additional service there. So, and then if you do the weighting, you would have adjusted for any potential needs of a completely different mix of students.
So you said, I'm sure that if you have questions, I'm sure other people have questions too, so would you express them?
No, I'm just very confused because we're not gonna build this budget. That's up to the staff to do that. So we're not building any budget. I feel like we're getting into something
Well, I
that's
can
not our,
explain.
that is not our purpose.
Let me explain
Yes,
just what
please do, because I don't
so
understand why we're.
our job as a board is to give a top line.
No, I understand that, but usually we get information first from, well, we used to be Tim, now Jean Marie, all the people who understand the numbers.
And
That's
then-
generally how
right.
it has worked.
And from a political standpoint, as a taxpayer, as somebody who doesn't have kids in school, I look at that process and I'm like, well, you're letting the Fox run the
Well,
NL.
no, that's why I was saying, like, we need to hear from the staff as well, like, you're fine, I personally am not comfortable right now making any decisions.
Oh,
I don't-
absolutely. I'm just saying that the purpose is
Like, I don't
that.
have the information right now.
You- you
Laura,
could-
I think what Seamus is trying to say, I hear both of you. I think what he's trying to say is there a framework that the community would like us to start this process with to keep their interests in mind so that when we do give them a budget that incorporates that framework, it's in a context
So I
that.
guess I'm further confused, because I thought that's where you paid to this consulting agency $60,000 to help us do that. So I guess I'm confused, like, where are they right now? Why aren't they?
That's a great question. Yeah,
That
that should bring back.
that is a great question, one I have,
I just don't
but
get-
I was hearing two different points, so just
Yeah,
want to
no, I
clarify.
hear you,
I
no,
think what,
thank you. I mean, it's not that I disagree with either one of you. I'm just, I look at this slide and this is, we paid $60,000 for this, and I wanna know where these people are. And why are they leaving?
Yeah, and I guess I'm just, Laura, the high level of what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to start from the position of like, what budget can we get passed? And then we back into other things. As opposed to starting from what money would be ideal and trying to pass that.
No, I get it, I just don't know why, I don't know why we paid them all this money.
I think the goal too was if we wait until we have all the numbers, the timeline is really tight and we're not getting.
No, that makes sense.
And so the goal was to start with a target. It's not going to be exact. And then to think about, okay, here's a target. And then come back to us. And now we have to say, okay, here's what our priorities are. Administrators, and get feedback from the community.
And the target that we might set might not be enough, it might not be a dollar amount.
Yeah,
It might just be like what the city council did.
yeah, oh, right, okay, I just feel like we're operating out.
You sort of have an idea of priorities. I assume like principals kind of have ideas about like what your wish list would be before you get a number. Do you have like ideas about, like maybe the Orchard knows like, gosh, our library is needing to bring that librarian back if we possibly can. Like, are those things already kind of in your mind when we're coming upon budget season about like, well, I need this in my school, lost it, I'd love to get it back, or.
Yes.
So you kind of, yeah, I mean, just say there's nothing wrong with like them, the principals already kind of just having
Right.
ideas about what their priorities are before we have an exact number or a range to give, right? I think that'd be good for reflection on this past year's been hard, as Jess said, and like how we could help students feel good in their classrooms, like you were saying. And I think it has a lot to do with the services and teachers.
I just wanna use the library as an example too, because I guess you do have to have a reasonable presentation for the taxpayers to justify, not an astronomical number to look crazy. But, in looking into the micro details of the library, like why is the library having issues in the first place? And are there philosophical problems that are happening at the library? For example, like purging out all of the books that don't have, perfect language in them and just having to repurchase all of the books from the library because it insults someone or has some kind of language. And so I think they did like a huge kind of book perjury that they got rid of a lot of materials. And who has a say on that? And, I guess those are kind of maybe the other audits that we kind of have to look at to just make sure that we're not wasting money.
Like
Doing
Jean Marie
something
mentioned.
that not everybody agrees in. And I feel like a lot of the librarians have quit because of that. Or not a lot. At least
Yeah, well,
one.
and Jean Marie mentioned efficiencies earlier, and I hear that word a lot, and I don't really, it's like a magic word to me. I'm like, that's the process you're
Yeah.
talking about, it's gonna take, like, how do we find out
micro
what's not
audits.
working? Yeah. And but that takes years, and I love, I love the idea of efficiency is to cut down money cost instead of having to not, you know, have as many resources for our kids. So,
But then you're running short stop here.
I'm quiet because I'm new here and I've only been here a few days, but I think what I'm hearing is, first of all, I'm hearing symptoms of leadership turnover, right? Because there's so many new people here that haven't been here, and so it's hard to give judgments on what programs are working if we're turning folks over. So we're at a disadvantage this year, but I'm also hearing that this board wants to get some feedback from our staff about what programs are we missing. I can almost guess that nobody would say we have too much programming. But I would like to hear from folks about what are we short of? I mean, I heard the library, I hear from other folks, but it sounds like you need some feedback, and it needs to be in pretty short order. In a perfect world, maybe we would have started this a month ago and had reaching out. So, would you like me to, yes, do what I can to gather some feedback from
Yeah.
our teams about his budget season? And we can't promise anything, but we need to get a sense for the new leadership here about what are you thinking?
Joe, I don't want to speak on behalf of the board, so I'm sort of posing this question to the board, and then maybe if we agree to you. I think it would be really helpful for us, one, yes, we are a new board. It would be helpful for us to get that list of all the things that the administrators would like to do. So if there's an assumption of, okay, if there was more money than was in last year's budget, what would you like to do differently? I would also love to get a list of like, what are the areas that we could trim? It would be helpful to have both of those so that we can put together the healthiest budget for taxpayers. And also recognizing the fact, when you had shared the data with me earlier, just that we have a flat to potentially declining student enrollment projection. So how do we manage that as well? If we have ever increasing budgets and never, moderating, potentially decreasing student population, we're gonna have to rate. There are things we should do that are new, that we want to do that are new. There are some things that we probably just need to make hard decisions about cutting. So is it okay if we ask Joe to get a list of like wish list and areas we could cut list from the administrators that we can start then incorporating into our budget?
Ultimately, I think we can use that. As I understand it, it's ultimately you guys are gonna decide how you spend the money, and we're gonna give you the top line priorities, and then we also have to be in sync so we can make the case to the taxpayer that it's worth voting yes on whatever. So I would absolutely be interested in that, but more from the, not because I'm gonna pick between what are we gonna cut, where do we keep, it's just so that I can then go to the voters and say, I really believe that even though it's expensive, we should really, reopen X or agree, whatever.
Well, programs mean people, right? So if anybody wants to add anything, it's going to be people, which is what costs money. So, and to stay status quo would mean still an increase if we're not cutting any programs, right?
But again, I go back to like what Laura was just saying, which is we just paid all this money for this model that we're creating here and the staffing allocations but I think how are we using that to look at what the budget is going to be? I think that's gonna be really critical. Instead of saying, and maybe this all fits into it, but instead of like, okay, here's our wish list. How does that translate to what we are getting out of this budget model? Are we using this budget model? Because we did just spend an exorbitant amount of money on that. And how are we using that model to give us this output that we need?
Well, I think that's sort of in here, where it's like this first slide is like, okay, that's what you need to keep the state regulations, right?
Lights
So we
on.
could get that number also from principal, and then we're moving over to the critical resources recommendation. And that's sort of the more on top, as far as I have reading this.
And I also feel a need that for me to immediately reach out to Tessa and introduce myself and get together with them and let them know that we're like some feedback.
And I think that like at large organizations, sometimes you need to pay people to tell you obvious things. And so like part of the value of having the timeline slide, which I think is for me, the most valuable thing Tassan provided, is it's telling the board, you guys need to set a number ASAP, because otherwise central office is flying blind. And then I love the fact that Tassan created legitimacy around the idea of giving principals allocations. You know, and so it's just like, sometimes, so I view a lot of that value as having been
Yep.
delivered just in the clarity of the process. Please.
I had a variety of comments I wanted to make. One is, I know that on our webpage, there's a like get in touch with us button that I think you folks put on there, and I think there's value in, especially with so many new board members, so many new district office folks, that there are people in our community, I'm for sure, who will say a statement like, well, I've been saying for years that we ought to outsource this or cut that, like this will say, and that no one's listened to, right? So I really hope that those folks inside and outside the district will click the button and give us that feedback, and, you know, on the website or in some of these community forums, because there likely are some good ideas there. There likely are some not great ideas there too, but I'd love to make sure that those folks have an opportunity to give them again. I like 3 or 4 unrelated things, and I'm gonna not remember them all. I really think that, there is, one of the things that Tassan did for us is help us work on who is owning the budget and giving them the power to put input into that. So like you said, you know, the Hollies, the Lissas, the Pat Burks of the world are gonna be able to say, our community knows that we need, like in Orchard, 2 librarians. And so that's how we're going to prioritize we are empowering the principals to put those budgets together. Well, it's hard getting old when you forget a lot of things.
Well, maybe from the first thing you said also goes back to one of the first things that Joe said, and it's related to what Austin said, which is, I think we said on the first slide, you showed that we would run a community survey. And it sounds like we need to do that like ASAP. Now I wonder if the board should run that because it's a budget thing instead of the school district. So that, I would be happy to receive advice about that.
Yeah.
But,
The reason the past have been kind of not very good to relay information, the ones that have been given to.
Could you be
What
specific?
has
Right?
Because the questions that they were asked were kind of not really answering the problems. They were kind of, you know, just, the way they were structured, they were not really helpful.
yeah, that's a
That's
great.
very,
I will second it.
very low.
Takes a lot of skill to write a really good survey that actually elicits the information you want. And it's really tricky when you're trying to do it in a very quick way, because you tend to hear from the squeaky wheels. You hear from this group of people who are kind of engaged already, and you miss out on a whole group of people, some of them parents, who maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe, you know, they have so much on their plate, like another survey, like is not. So you're missing, I think, a lot of voices. So I don't think it's a bad idea to do a survey. I just think that if you do it, you have to, I would say the board is probably not the right person, because there are some folks in the district who have done surveys before and maybe some of you guys have skills, I don't know them. So maybe someone is an expert. But I would also just caution that whatever you do get back, you just take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because it's gonna not necessarily, no matter how hard you work, we don't have 6 months to, you know, go to every single group and hand them the survey and walk.
Although
through
on
it.
that
No,
point,
We do have a communication person,
right.
so.
And Joe's about to go talk to a bunch of, when you go to the senior center, bring some paper copies.
Yeah.
That sounds like we'll have a limited ability to deliver it to some groups that traditionally wouldn't respond to a web survey.
Even if it is a small group that's responding, having the relevant questions that pertain to the outcomes and the results. The way the survey is written is
Yeah.
kind of the most important, like, bottom line that we gotta start with.
We did get over 400 responses on the interim superintendent, which is great.
I remembered my
remember?
last
Great,
thing,
great.
sorry. Before I forget again, I just want to recognize how uncomfortable we all are with the schedule of events for this budget. And I want to remind us, the main reason why we're doing that is because we heard from the community time and time again that by the time they heard what was in the budget, you were voting on it, or they were expected to vote on it. So we're trying, that's why everything is so early, that we want them to say, I value an additional lacrosse team. And I want you to put that into the budget, or for the love of Pete, don't cut the art program, whatever those things are. That's why we're doing this now, not in February and March, when they come, they're mad, and the opportunity is gone, yeah.
And it's like Joe said at the community forum, don't just talk to people when you need the money.
Right. Yes, yeah.
I wanted to reiterate something that Joe said a minute ago, and I hope we all hear clearly. I think one of the first things the board needs is to completely understand what a flat budget's gonna cost. So if we keep everything status quo, I can guarantee that's gonna cost you 5%, 5.5%. So that you know that if you're gonna come back to say CPI at 3.4, that means we cut. So I think that bottom line information is an important piece of information that you.
This is what we did in our 6.
And the other, sorry,
You know,
to jump in, and we all know that the primary driver behind increased costs is healthcare. And so, you brought that up, Austin. And so it can't just be the CPI, it has to be the CPI plus what is our increase.
Bridget had that, there's an inflation number that's in that account.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I was gonna ask Jean Marie, if you have, do you have a sense for when we might know the inflation number? For insurance, understanding that that will be like our first major bump in the road to incorporation.
Off the top of my head in this moment, I don't.
The Vermont Care Board,
When we
yeah.
have that information.
Yeah, but it's gotta be part of your first number,
Right.
because otherwise, those cuts come immediately when we pay for healthcare.
Right.
Without losing teachers.
That's what I don't know what
Right.
Joe thinks about that,
Yeah.
but maybe we need a budget committee. So we're not
Okay,
gonna
so
solve this
we
today.
have 3 topics,
But-
we've covered 2 of them. I wanted to give Holly a chance to, if you had anything.
Oh, I
before we
was
move
just,
on to
I
the
was
next
just
topic.
thinking, as far as surveys go, we put out a family survey through Panorama as one of our continuous improvement, plan goals at the end of October. So just that awareness that we're already asking families to do a survey, and I know families have only so much capacity to. I don't wanna over survey parents, but we do try and do that at the end of October when
Yeah.
the conference.
And I'm really focused on the 80% of people who would never receive that survey in the first place.
I'm honestly don't think I'm gonna answer the survey unless it's like reworded, because it was a waste of time doing that. So I think that's.
Survey design is very important because if you expect 10,000 people to take a survey, every question, every word and every question matters. Yeah, that's a great point. Elizabeth.
One quick suggestion I might have is, if Joe could meet with Jesse Baker, the city manager, and city has a different mailing, I think, of a city bulletin. And we can't use it, but there could be an opt-in potentially available on the website, or a link to school-related matters. That's just a suggestion that might target a different audience.
It's a great idea.
All right. Was there anything?
No. Segue into.
All right, so our last question is, what committees does the community wants to be a part of, and how should they work? I know that Joe had a great suggestion for how committees could work. My concern about committees that I raised at the last meeting was around breaking policy governance. The board is not supposed to get into the details of curriculum, operations, stuff like that. And so I would be concerned about having a board committee about curriculum. But I think Joe might have an answer for us on how we might do that.
Well, I'll tell you what we did in Ohio, and I think it's probably true well, I know it's true for Vermont. I did some research in it. In Ohio, if a school board committee is required to follow all of the laws related to open meetings. So that means if the board had a committee of a budget committee or a curriculum committee or whatever, you would have to post the meeting, you'd have to warn the agenda, you'd have to take minutes and all those kinds of things. It becomes rather burdensome, quite frankly. What we did often in Ohio, and I imagine, I haven't had a chance to meet other superintendents, they probably do it here too, is it's the superintendent who has committees. They're advisory committees. It can include some board members. It can absolutely include community members. But it takes away all of the bureaucracy and red tape of actually getting together and having meetings and taking notes and all that. So
That's exactly how most boards do it.
yeah, so
Yes.
my in Nordonia where I worked, we had a finance committee, we had an athletic committee, we had a curriculum committee, we had a special ed committee, we had a technology committee. And it would be, every year, a board member or two would volunteer to be on the committee. We would have community members that would be on the committee. We'd have, representatives from the teaching staff, and then whatever central office, central office administrator, that was their purview, right? So the curriculum director would be leading the curriculum committee, and he would put together the agenda, invite people, those kinds of things. I am a huge proponent of having advisory committees, and like I said, I think probably several times is, you know, if you get advice, you need to be ready to take advice. Because if you ask questions, people are gonna give you their opinions, and I think that there's a lot of vulnerability in involving people, but I think it's really important. The community owns the schools, and we're stewards of it.
Right.
So I would love for us to be able to get some committees. My recommendation would be, if you give some ideas about what kind of committees would want, I would like for them to be superintendent advisory, and then get them set up really pretty quickly. And get board members to volunteer to be on which ones, and then we can start.
And then you can maintain operational control.
Yeah.
I vote for budget committee.
We're not taking action.
I know, just kidding.
The budget, yeah. Budget committee is great.
A budget committee here in South Burlington.
There was.
It gets reconstituted in different ways, like
Yeah, they
back
did.
in the day,
What
it
was
used
it
to be run, it was the Citizens Budget Advisory Group. And it was run by the business manager at the time, John Stewart used to run it. And David Young, who was the superintendent at the time, would come when he could. He was there most of the nights. And that's how I kind of ended up on the board originally, is John asked me to be on that Citizens Budget Advisory Group. And but you also have to be really clear when you set the parameters about what you're expecting those committees to do. And that advisory word is really important, because you don't want people to walk in thinking that they are making decisions, but that rather they are giving advice.
Well, we
And,
just, we
yeah.
just did the advisory, that we had the advisory committee to appoint you. And in the past couple of years, we have had just board members be in the budget committee, but I do think it would make, we haven't had the superintendent take the lead on that, and I think that is what needs to happen. I think you'll get traction, I think you'll get buy-in.
Yep.
I think you'll, you
Yeah.
maintain control.
And it's similar to the purpose of this meeting was to have the board here present in full quorum. So that it wasn't like we were having like a mini meeting, you know, like some of the previous community outreach was only one board member at a time, and it's like, well, if I went to that meeting, I wouldn't be influencing as much as I could. So the superintendent's there, you know, which also means you have to have fewer committees.
Yeah, so we've done, I mean, I was on the 5th grade committee, and that went to all 5 schools. Almost no one showed. I did another listening to, when I first got on the board when we did the superintendent search 3.5 years ago, nobody showed. So I've done this 4 times and nobody has showed up. So
This is the way to do it.
I just think this is the way to do it.
You get a handful of standing committees, and then if you find out you don't need them, you get rid of them. If you find out you need another, you add another. It's easy to do because it doesn't have to go through the process of.
So based on some of the feedback tonight and things that were discussed, I mean, I think the budget committee is a great idea. Academic curriculum support, I think would be a very good one to consider.
A labor relations committee, I think would be a good one.
That one,
But that's just standing, is that the thing?
Yeah, that's a
stand.
quite frankly, I don't know that I would invite community members to be on that relation. I think that's.
No, that wouldn't be community members, that would be like you and Daisy and board members and union leaders.
But we need to put together a permanent superintendent search one as well. That's a separate. Yeah, so.
That is,
Yeah.
that's a board ad hoc committee I'm talking about.
The town I live in, and their school board has like a community engagement. Yeah, they have facilities Yeah, super important one.
Yeah.
And I think they have, I feel like they have one more, but I can't remember.
And so facilities and community engagement for each of those, would they be a board committee or a superintendent?
I think they're superintendent committees and they have board meetings on, or board members on.
And I
them.
think, and then you ask the committee to periodically report to them. This is what
Yeah.
we've been talking about. These are.
It's- And that's when they vote.
We're gonna
Yeah.
adopt the textbook. It was vetted through the curriculum. Committee. We had a diversity committee, you know, so we could talk about those kind of issues.
I have a quick, Joe, which superintendent committees in the past did you find, were the most helpful to you in your role and the board and their administration?
I think it changed. Boards have different priorities, so there was a time when the athletic committee was the most important committee that we had, and then that board member went off the board and that stopped meeting. The curriculum committee was, I think, one that we, I was in Nordonia 14 years. It was there when I started. It was there when I was gone because it was looking at adoption of, our one-to-one technology program, textbooks, new courses, all of those kinds of things. We added a diversity committee later, which I thought was incredibly helpful. There was a finance committee that we called it a finance committee, so it would be people. It would be the finance folks in the district trying to help the community understand how school finance works. It could certainly be a budget part to that,
So you're saying that perhaps instead of having a budget committee, you have a finance committee, and it just happens.
They focus on the budget to start.
You call it finance budget.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
You can use slashes or whatever,
Resources.
I think whatever we're interested, I mean, what's our key, what are the key things that we do, right? We educate kids. We spend a lot of community taxpayer money, and I think those absolutely need to be two of the priorities.
Elizabeth, did you want?
A couple of thoughts I had with this agenda item is, and maybe this could be rolled into the curriculum committee you're talking about, but to include student outcomes in that, because that's directly applicable to the community when they're looking at budgets. If you can demonstrate improved outcomes, that's key. I think, a redistricting committee would be critical right now, because, we need a voice among failure. I've talked before about a city school committee. I'm not sure that would make the highest priority if you're starting to look at those now, but demographics, capital needs or bonding needs are important. There's been a significant investment made by the city in an economic development plan, which looks at career pathing and improving the tax base, which is relevant. Housing, which is critical not only to employees, but residents, affordables, I should say. And then climate initiatives, which cross over city and school and really move our community forward as a leader of the state. And then the last one I had written down was the strategic plan. That has not been stated in a long time. The district, and it marries right into the ends policy and whether that needs revisiting. So those are top of mind for me.
Those are great. And then I was gonna add, somebody said Elizabeth, like a student committee. Student committee would be great. And then there are only 7 of us. So I'm wondering like
Start with a
like,
few.
yeah, so what's like a reasonable number of committees? Like, that's a great.
Well, there's 9 if you count these guys.
I was gonna say, like,
That's
I
not-
know that there's students on all of those committees.
Yeah. We had a special ed committee in
Okay.
Nordonia where I was
Okay.
started.
Yeah, sorry, what is?
Yeah, how do we divide these up now? I think we just listed,
Yeah.
24 communities or committees, sorry.
The thing is, I think the budget is the biggest thing, and then we're doing the superintendent search, so. Having just done the interim search, I can tell you that is hours and hours and hours of work. So I just wanna make sure that we know, that we choose wisely, and they're all really important, I don't know how to choose.
If I could do whatever we want to do, the practice that we had in our place was the committees would meet maybe 4 times a year, quarterly maybe.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
For an hour and a half,
So-
2 hours.
Not like 3 times a week that we did.
Because we want people to come back.
And I have a
Okay.
question. So I think, I don't remember who brought it up, but maybe it was Beth about a community engagement committee.
Yep.
And to me, the board is responsible for a lot of the community engagement for the school. You know, the board, if a school budget failed, that is on the board. And so like, for me, the word community engagement is a little bit too abstract, because you know what I mean? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I have to remind that Elaine and I did that last year. It was this time last year we met, we did it, once every 2 weeks, 4 times, and nobody showed up. Because we were trying to do the board community outreach, and we met at the, and we met at the library. It was very, really thought about it. We thought, okay, wanted to go to a place where we don't feel obligated to buy any food, that the library is free to everybody, nobody came. I did it at night, I did it on a weekend, and I just think if it's just us. Without Dr. Joe, I don't think people are gonna take it as seriously. I just don't, I don't take it personally. I'm just saying that I think it's gonna.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe my other piece of advice would be, let me run these 3Q meetings that I'm gonna have October,
Yeah, that's
November,
great.
and I think we'll get a lot of feedback from the
Yeah.
community about
Okay.
what their priorities are, and that might help us decide where committees are that we're gonna need together.
I think.
And that would also feed into a strategic plan.
Okay, so I just looked it up. They have a community engagement committee, a facilities committee, a finance committee, a policy committee. And then the other two are not necessarily.
So that,
These look like they're all, well,
Where's this?
I mean, if they're meeting quarterly, that's doable.
Right.
I was thinking like once a week, no way.
It sounds like, right, there are some committees we'd like to agree 100% right now, we put budget and finance, probably academic, and then superintendent search, which is a board committee, so.
Yeah.
On the side. The rest, is it appropriate for us to follow up with Dr. Joe, especially after his 3 key meetings, and figure out which committees we might want to institute after that, but we say, you know, we know right now, we want a budget committee. We want a academic committee, right? It sounds like we're universal, and then the rest, we can work with Dr. Joe to determine later, based on community feedback.
I'm comfortable with that.
You know, and I actually would be interested to know too, regarding like the idea of an athletic committee. There's pep club or, you know, boosters, and there's groups like that kind of already exist. And is there any way to bridge and have some engagement with those folks?
Right.
Because one of the things that I've seen, and I've noticed having had kids in the school is, you know, even regarding sports, I feel like they're so important for kids to have an opportunity to play. And I've seen comments regarding this on Facebook. I know I experienced it when my kids were younger, where maybe they try out and they don't make a team. And it's heartbreaking because it's like, you know, even if they're not gonna make the junior varsity team or the varsity team, to have the opportunity to play. Because otherwise, these kids are gonna, what else are they gonna do? They're gonna go home and, you know, on a computer or what? So I mean, the idea of that, so again, I'm just kind of floating that out there as that kind of idea, and how could we pull in, you know, perhaps some existing groups already that could
Yeah,
be a
so
part of that.
Nordonia's athletic committee was athletic director, superintendent, a couple board members, a handful of coaches, booster club presidents, they would be on there, and they would discuss things about, hey, we need new turf, or we need whatever, and they would talk sometimes about policy, you know, that they might want to implement, and you know, like a minimum rate, like all those kinds of things. They'd have those discussions and give some advice.
What about something like the arts? Where, I mean, I really think that's key,
Well,
you know, for
art.
the art, the arts, because there are plenty of kids who are not interested in sports or don't feel
Right.
that's the place for them. And, you know, I think their interests are just as important.
That reminds me of that slide from last week or 2 weeks ago that Monica showed us, where like the after school activities that were non-athletic was like. It was right on par.
Yeah, it was right on par.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The after school, something like
Yeah,
that.
use it or-
A third space committee.
This is
Is there a
awesome.
space committee?
or just student activities.
Which is the space outside of academics.
That data's fine.
Oh, third place is like academic stand up, third place. What are the other two?
Representative.
Home and school.
Homeschool, I see.
And I think this is great, just the brainstorming
Yeah.
idea, and then it's like, how do we?
So yes, what's the next step? You're gonna do your listening things and get ideas? Is
Yeah,
that
so
come
my
back to us?
plan is within October, November, to get out to as many of these community groups as I can to do the listen tour. And I will absolutely give the board and the community feedback. That will all be
Okay.
public stuff. But I'm also hearing that if we maybe don't want to wait to get a curriculum committee and a budget/finance committee together, we can start that. I can work on that tomorrow. It sounds also like you want some feedback from our educators about budget stuff and like pie in the sky. Hey, if we could add programming, what that might be and why. Also, hey, is there anything we're doing that we shouldn't be? I doubt you'll get people saying yes, cut some staff, but you can ask the question. You know,
That was my request. I don't know that the board necessarily agrees with that, so I wanna make sure that like, if that's.
I think you're allowed to ask for information.
Okay,
on
that's,
an individual basis.
I don't wanna create work for you, but also is that something we would find value in setting this initial number with the principals and Joe, or is it not? Is that not the right information we need to set that? I asked that question, I don't think we fully like answered
I
that.
think definitely we need what Daisy pointed out as in terms of like, if we just did the same thing, what would that number
I
be?
think that's important.
Yeah, we need to know, yeah.
And then, I think it's important to know if, is there any glaring, anything that we're not doing that is glaringly obvious that we should be? In other words, are we damaging kids because of something we're not providing to them?
Right.
And if that's the case, then I think we need to seriously consider it. But at this point, I mean, we're late in the game. I don't know that you do more than status quo is unless there's something glaring. But I think it's good to get some feedback.
Understand if there's a delta, a gap that needs to be closed. Yeah.
There's 2 clerks.
Yes, well, it's been a great conversation.
Any final thoughts?
Yes.
What's our next meeting?
When's our next community forum? I was thinking, what about next week? Sure. All right, well, so thank you very much for coming. We hope that you, not only come to our board meetings, our community forums, but also you bring your friends. And, thank you to Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks
And
to everybody here.
we'll put more information on on this idea of committees. And there will be an outreach, I would envision, for the community for if people are interested in participating and.
Yeah.
getting involved in our things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
By the absolute latest, it'll be Monday that I mean, we're talking curriculum and we're talking budget, so that means we're talking about Nicole, Jean Marie.
Yeah.
Which means we sit with them and say, hey.
Just a quick comment, there's about 130 community volunteers for city committees.
Awesome.
And they do operate on the complete transparency and open meeting law. But there is an application. So I don't know if you want to go that
We have
route.
done it.
It's not,
Yeah, we've done
it's
it.
not detailed, but at least it gives you some information about the candidate if you want to consider that.
I think it's great if there's committees there too, where you can have people then perhaps have some overlap and some cross pollination.
And I think it's a mix of community, students and, staff. Staff.
Yeah.
Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Before you do, so our next meeting then.
Yes.
It's not next week, it's gonna be October
No,
3rd.
it's next week.
It's not.
Our next meeting is October 8th, I thought.
October 8th?
Yeah, October 8th.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Let's do
that's-
that.
yeah,
I clarified that.
And the form, I think, is TBD. To be determined.
The which, the
The
fourth,
form, the next one, to be determined.
the next
The
one,
next
yeah, we don't have a date.
Yeah,
for the
right.
next meeting.
Okay.
And the board may schedule
Chamber.
a special meeting between now and October 8th.
Yep.
Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Now we'll try again. I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? Now's your chance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.